Here with us now to talk more is former Europe, Africa, and Middle East editor at the Associated Press, Dan Perry. Dan, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. These reports are saying that this Ukrainian drone attack was more than a year and a half in the making, so a lot of planning here, and it was carried out in a region where Ukrainian drones hadn't been seen yet. So what kind of impact is all this going to have on Russian operations?
Well, Russia is not acting like a country that seems to need to take public opinion into account. And so when you have a dictatorship, essentially, or in any case, a very small inner circle that decides, it's difficult to predict. But I doubt they're going to say, okay, this is so impressive and brazen and it was so successful, which it was, that we're now going to give up. It probably in the short term will lead to actual counter-offensives. But I wouldn't discount the fact that Ukraine has successfully delivered the message that they can carry out attacks thousands of miles inside Russia that are incredibly strategic and rather clever. These drones should not be a war-winning strategy. But it does suggest that Russia has been very derelict in guarding its own strategic air bases and clearly doesn't say good things about the Russian war effort. Interesting that the U.S. volunteers that they didn't know about it, because why would they do that unless they're trying to basically create deniability vis-a-vis Putin as part of Trump's general effort to project that if he's impartial in the war and quite possibly in favor of Putin.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Why disclose that? And then to your point, too, about Russia seeming to not care about public opinion. We know a couple of weeks ago that President Vladimir Putin didn't show up for those ceasefire negotiations while Ukrainian President Zelensky was there waiting on him in Turkey. Why could this round of talks be any different? Will it be?
Well, look, I mean, Trump's position that basically might embolden Putin also very much projects to Zelensky that the U.S. support, which is critical to the war effort, is not guaranteed. Now, from the American side, you can be horrified that he would be projecting this. But a lot of people are basically looking for an elegant way out, whereas I'm not sure that Putin would accept it. There are indications that Zelensky might. So, for example, reports about the document that Ukraine has circulated before the talks begin suggest that whereas they are asking for some territories back, and remember they lost about 20% of their territory in the war, they're not insisting on all the territory, and whereas, at least not in the document, and whereas they are talking about a path to EU membership, which I think is critical, and which I think the Europeans would be very wise to extend it, to accelerate. He's not demanding membership in NATO, even though NATO, offered them, in theory, the right to membership in 2008. They are demanding security guarantees, which is fair enough. So I think you can mock Trump for abandoning Ukraine, but perhaps it'll have the effect of easing events toward a compromise that might be plausible, at least creating an interregnum in wars, because of course there are fears that any success in the war, any validation of his aggression would only embolden Putin going forward, because he doesn't want to restore the Soviet Empire. One more point, if I may.
Okay, sure.
It is clear that the Trump administration has a very different view from every other one since World War II about how to handle these things. Basically, Trump appears willing to view the world as, zones of influence where he goes above the heads of smaller countries and negotiates with Xi Jinping of China and with Putin, sort of spheres of influence. And there is the sense that Trump is willing to cede to Putin spheres of influence that largely align with the old Soviet Empire. Consider that 2 weeks ago, in an election where Romania just barely stayed in the Western camp, Trump supported the anti-Western candidate. And there's a big drama happening today in Poland, similarly, a pro-Western and anti-Western candidate. Trump world basically supports the anti-Western candidate.
Well, he does seem to be, Trump, that is, does seem to be growing more frustrated with Putin than he has been, in months past, without a doubt. And he's under growing pressure from Congress to impose more sanctions. So we're watching this one closely. Former Europe, Africa, and Middle East editor at the Associated Press, Dan Perry, thanks for weighing in today.